Welcome to Original Being, where we explore the timeless wisdom of ancient practices and old ways of living, from holistic health and wellness to survival techniques, homesteading, and primitive skills. I'm Jillian Erice, a functional and holistic-minded physician associate and a homesteading mother of 3. I am on a quest to reconnect with this knowledge our ancestors lived by, practical skills, natural healing, and self-sufficiency in a modern world. Each episode, I'll be sharing insights, experiences, and conversations with experts and everyday people who embody this mindset. Together, we'll challenge modern conveniences, embrace hands-on learning, and rediscover the practices that have stood the test of time. Disclaimer, the information shared on this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. My opinions and those of my guests are solely our own and are not affiliated with any institutions, employers, or certifications. This podcast does not provide medical advice, and any health-related decisions should be made in consultation with your personal healthcare provider. By listening, you acknowledge that you take full responsibility for your own choices and actions. Today on Original Being, I have Kerry Kott. Kerry Kott is a barefoot medicine woman, a licensed physician of Chinese medicine, and the voice behind the Naked Human podcast. She lives off-grid and works closely with the earth, the body, and the unseen. Her work weaves together plant spirit wisdom, nudity as medicine, emotional release, and ancestral healing. Kerry creates spaces, retreats, ceremonies, and intimate containers where women can unravel shame, listen to their wombs, and return to the wild truth of who they are. Hi, Kerry.
Hi, Jillian. I don't know what it is about you, but I got leaky eye syndrome over here.
Oh my gosh.
Being with you and hearing that and just feeling so touched by whatever's going to happen here.
Yeah, your bio is so beautiful. Just everything you're doing feels so heart-centered, and I listened to a lot of your podcast and I felt like I really got to know you, and your enthusiasm for what you're doing is contagious.
Thank you. Thank you for reflecting that.
Why don't we tell the listeners, because now I've sort of learned this through your podcast, but you are a physician of Chinese medicine. So how did you get into this nudity and nature as healing space? And I know that is kind of multifaceted because you've had a few different experiences that led you there, but perhaps what sort of was that pivotal moment that you decided this is the message I need to bring to the world?
Yeah, you're right. There's very many nuances to the experience of how this came to be. I do always like to share is that I wasn't looking for it. Wasn't like I was what thing can I do? It was just I was listening to my inner wisdom, and that pivotal moment where this came online as something I was sharing with others in the way of inviting them into this space and working with them this way is I was actually taking a photograph of a leaf. And behind that is getting a professional camera, which I was resistant to many years, which was invoked by a little spider in the woods in the middle of winter. And I was like, wow, it's time to get this camera. And I was taking a photograph of this leaf, and the thought just came in, I want to do this for other people. And it was just photography, capturing other people naked with the earth, intertwined as a part of. And I actually had a woman coming for a private retreat. It was 2 weeks after this moment. And while she was here, and I didn't share this, while she was here, she asked if I could take photographs of her naked outside. And I was like, oh, here it is. But it was that moment that thought came in, and I was clearly ready. And I was like, I want to share this. I want to do this.
And you had already started to experience being naked in nature yourself at that point, correct?
Yeah. I think it was maybe 4 years. I was in this taking self-portraits of myself naked, exploring being naked outside, alone, mostly alone, but there were also other places that I was going intentionally, like a nude beach, environments where nudity was welcome, more of a naturism title where it's about being with the earth. So I was exploring that.
And I remember listening to you talking about shedding your clothing in nature, or this, like, I guess this one moment where I think you were like on a bed of moss and you were shedding your clothing very slowly until you did get completely naked in nature and had this profound experience of saying, like, this is just profound healing and something you'd never felt before. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I love how you started. I was in a bed of moss, because I totally was.
Because that stuck in my head, because like, that sounds lovely.
I know. Moss is so incredibly magical. And just even like thinking about moss right now in my body, I can just feel that energy. And so this was actually like this experience that you referenced was like my first official full-on photo shoot with myself. And I was coming to Michigan to visit my family, and I had received this thought to go into the woods and do this photo shoot with myself. And I was like so excited. It was like waking up on Christmas Day. It's like, this is the day. And I went out into the woods, and it was this really slow process. And there was moss and the trees and the smell. It was just like so alive. And I would take one piece of clothing off, and then I would look at the photo I took. And then I would take another piece of clothing off and then look at the photo I took. It was like very slow process, which in hindsight, I really get how that's really healing in itself, and being really slow and looking at myself. And there was a moment in that process when I looked at one of my photographs and I saw myself and thought, wow, I'm really beautiful. And like, that wasn't my way of thinking. Mm-hmm. And that moment was so magical. And then I continued to like move to different places in the forest. And it was just like, it started to become really super erotic to me. And it was just like this, the slowness, the being with the earth, the seeing myself, like just being in that whole experience. I don't even know how long I was out there, maybe for like an hour and a half or 2 hours, like just slowly doing this whole process and then like having fun. And it was really magical. And so that was definitely a pivotal moment. And that wasn't the moment that I was like, wow, I need to share this with others. It was just like, whoa.
Do you think that being in nature helped you see yourself in that different way? Like, do you, or maybe not just you, women in general, as this is now your work, taking us out of an indoor setting or like a studio setting and now saying you're part of this, almost like in our animal form, does that make us see ourselves differently?
Yes, I would agree. I have no scientific proof. I only have my experience. I would say yes, absolutely, for sure. I mean, for me, I'll speak for myself, is that being indoors and being outdoors are two different experiences. Even being in my cabin, which is a tiny cabin in the forest, and it has all these windows, there's even a shift of energy of being inside my cabin to being outside. And then when we remove our clothing and we're outside, like all of our body gets to interact with our environment. Like, we are a part of the earth. We are a part of nature. And so something really magical comes online and we get reminded, and that can't be replaced indoors. Like, and the earth is speaking. And one of the things, this is coming through now, but one of the things that the earth said to me when I was listening to, like, okay, I'm going to be facilitating these experiences, is she said to me, my job was to get people here and that they would do the rest. Like, that nature, the earth would do the rest, but to create the container, to invite the women in, to invite the people to come. And it's like, this is who we are. Like, the earth is who we are. So yeah, there's some, and also like, it's not just us. It's not just, there's so much that we're getting connected to, like our backs are communicating with the elements, like our elbows are freed up, like all these parts of our body are more online and interacting with the dirt, the sun, the wind, the trees, and this communication is just full on.
Yeah, because we talk about grounding now and we're just talking about our feet. I mean, imagine if your whole body can connect with the earth without clothing on. What's happening electric wise, or that kind of connection very few people are having. I would say, I think.
Yeah.
Very few people are getting full body touching the earth. Like you've had those experiences, and I can't even fathom how that would feel or what that would do to your physiology too.
Well, it would feel really divine and magical and safe. One of the things that I've discovered for myself and being naked and also being barefoot way more than I ever have been. Like standing on a slippery rock, being barefoot to me now, I'm so aware of how much safer I feel in my body, how much safer I feel online with my senses. Like I can trust myself, and which has been a part of my journey with nudity being medicine and being healing for me, is like finding or reclaiming my own autonomy and feeling safe. So there's something really safe about being connected to the earth.
Yeah. Like not just grounded for the grounding people talk about, but like actually grounded. Like I am connected. I'm attached to this. I'm part of this.
Yeah. And I'm not alone.
Yeah. Yeah. And that makes me think about letting go of your ego. Is that something you have found or that you're kind of incorporating in your retreats? Almost like we open ourselves to this complete vulnerability and then we shed the ego in that. Does that resonate or no?
Yeah, it does resonate. I don't usually use the word ego, or necessarily, I don't not use the word ego, but that's definitely what's happening, right? It's like, but it's also, for me, it's about coming together with all the parts of ourselves. So like our ego aspect of our human experience is there, it's there to protect us. And when we can come more online with ourselves and love that part of our like human existence, then we can actually navigate that a little bit differently. And it's like shedding what's there and coming more together with like who we really are and all those parts of us that are operating to keep us safe. And so it's definitely happening.
So really self-love too. I mean, that's coming back, like you said, this is what I've found as a common theme, I think, in a lot of the things you've talked about is, like all of a sudden looking at yourself, seeing yourself as beautiful and being able to send this like gratitude and love back to the body because you see it as part of this beautiful thing in nature, like a flower that we are like, admiring, instead of the self-critical that I think so many women especially have when they look at their naked bodies. I want to talk more about that and how you hold this sacred space for other women too, and reframe this mindset that a lot of us have maybe had since childhood.
Yeah, let's do that. I love this. Yeah, our bodies. So how I see it is there's so much shame around our bodies, period. And as being women, we have a different operating system. So the way that we relate even to our bodies is, we have this like inner critic and we're always wrong and something's always off. And there's a perfect woman that exists in the world and we can never be her, And so like, that's rough.
Yeah.
And there's shame around our bodies, no matter who we are. And what I see is that like this like mandatory, I'm doing like air quotes, but like this mandatoriness of like needing to cover up sends us a subliminal message that who we are is wrong. And also like we have to cover ourselves up to protect ourselves, right? Like if, we expose our nipples, then we're vulnerable, and like these parts of our bodies that we're supposed to cover up, if they're exposed, we're vulnerable, we're wrong and bad. And so I just see it as that like we're all walking around with this subliminal programming that who we are is inherently wrong and bad. And so coming into a space where we can actually remove that, to shed that layer really opens up something magical. And it's interesting in these spaces that I hold, like just being naked alone is doing so much. How I see it in these spaces and how I create a container is that what happens inside is actually less important than like what's contained, like the sacredness of the experience. And then we get naked and we do it together. And then there's so much that happens in just being naked. I mean, like eating food naked, walking around naked, going to the bathroom naked, hugging naked, just all these natural functions that we're doing. And by the way, we get to like pee in front of each other into the earth. And like that in itself is actually quite healing.
You know, you stay naked the whole weekend. Like there's no clothing.
Well, so there is clothing if it's cold. Like, so if it's chilly in the morning. So this last retreat that I did in Florida, we had some cold nights. So we actually spent more time clothed than we ever have at any of my retreats. And so the invitation is medicine. So when women sign up, they're saying yes to being naked. And within that container, in that experience, they have freedom. So like if it's chilly in the morning, you know, wearing a robe, or if at some point they need some comfort to like have a blanket. And I encourage them to bring things that feel really sexy, sensual, luxurious, soft, maybe things that aren't a part of their everyday wardrobe, so that if they do want to cover up, if they're feeling cold, or for whatever reason, they can invite some different texture onto their body. But there's no judgment about like them, you know, putting clothes on for a moment or a robe. And, you know, oftentimes it is because it's cold.
Mm-hmm. I guess I'm curious how you approach that first time. So do they take the clothing off slowly initially too? Because I guess I'm going to just be vulnerable and open up here. Like I'm very uncomfortable being naked. And that's why I'm so curious to talk to you. And I have to say that going into it, going on a naked retreat was not something on my radar or something I would have considered. And then after listening to your podcast and hearing you talk about all these things and all the healing that happens and the mindset shift, I was like, wow, this might be something that's really good for me. You know, this might be something I should do because I am so like painfully self-conscious and uncomfortable being naked. Do you have people who come to these retreats that are like that? And are we approaching it from let's start really slowly? Or is it like, nope, we're all together and we're just going to shed the skin right away?
Aw, thank you so much for sharing that about yourself too, Jillian. I really appreciate your vulnerability, and you're not alone. You are not alone in that experience. And I have had women come who are nervous, like really nervous about it. And one of the things that I also do is I provide support before we even get together. We have a private call together. So there's a private space for you and I to have a conversation about what's there for you, what's showing up. And this is also about shedding the layers. And so it's also about preparing you. And then we have a collective call with all the women, a part of the retreat as well. And so there's a space to connect with, okay, these are the other women there. These are the other energies. And when we get undressed, so like it's actually happened many different ways. So every experience that I do, I learn so much more. And this last retreat in particular, I feel like each retreat has its own consciousness, and I'm listening of like what's needed here and the women who come together. And the space is definitely about slowing down. Mm-hmm. But this particular retreat kept asking me to keep slowing down even more. And so we did it in a really slow process. And that was something that I felt really strongly about too. So the undressing process was done really slowly. It was just like taking a layer off. And then I was guiding it. So it was like just staying in that space until I guided to remove the next layer. And then the next layer. Because when I've done it in the past where it's like, okay, here's this space to get naked. And some women, they just rip their clothes off, and some women are a little more apprehensive. I can't say for sure that it will always be that way because, you know, sometimes I think like, okay, I got it. It's going to go like this. And then it's like, no, actually, this is what's needed right here, right now. So it's really about feeling into the people that are there. And I had a woman at this last retreat, and she definitely had a lot of like, you know, like fear and stuff coming up around being naked. And so I was also mindful that her energy was in that space, and also we needed to slow down, you know, and that was medicine for all the women there. So I'm actually a fan of that process because and also it just so happened that we did it more like as it was getting dark. And it was really interesting to hear the feedback from the women. And in particular, this one woman who said, she was like, wow, that was really helpful to do it in the dark, like as it was getting darker.
Yeah.
You know, to like do that process in that way. It was like less vulnerable and it was slower. So there's a mindfulness about what's needed for everyone that's there, and it just always comes together.
So then, like maybe that woman in particular, or women like me, at the end of the weekend, what is their feedback on how they're feeling about their bodies or about being naked at that point?
Well, this is what's popping in. I can share that. So I take photographs of the women, and that also has changed throughout the years that I've done retreats and how that shows up. And so at this last retreat, I took some intentional time one-on-one with each of the women. And this particular woman was so excited and to get her photo taken. I mean, that to me was just like this huge reflection of where she had come from the beginning, where she had started, and what was happening for her at the end, that she was having fun having these photographs taken of her and just witnessing what was different.
What's coming up for me, and when you were talking a little bit earlier, is thinking there's so many reasons why this is so important and healing for women in particular. But the first thing that came up, I was just thinking about how men are comfortable being shirtless all the time, right? Like from and I can't generalize all men, but it's acceptable in our society, I should say. Like it's totally acceptable for men to be topless. And that I feel like even since I was a little kid, I've been so self-conscious and aware of even like my abdomen or my belly showing, not just, you know, before there was ever like a breast situation where you're like, oh no, I can't show this. This isn't allowed. This is illegal. Before that was even a thing. I was still like, that was not something that I felt comfortable having shown in a bathing suit. I never wore a two-piece. It makes me pause and think, well, where did that come from? You know, I'm always like going back. What's the origin? Where did that come from? Did someone make me feel uncomfortable about it? Was it just a societal message? But I can only imagine that, and that's just the tip of the iceberg for women and their bodies and what we're seeing, the messages we're getting. And then for you to tell me too, when you bring in that other layer of safety, which is so huge, it's not safe for you to be naked in public because somebody could hurt you. You know, it's not safe because you're drawing attention that's unwanted. So to create this space for women that not only can you not be judged and be authentically yourself and let yourself be naked in a completely safe space where now, which you've mentioned a lot, like sex is not expected of you. It's not sexualized. That's a profound experience that women need. Women need to have that. We don't have that.
Yes, we do need that. And there's so much in what you just shared there. And one of the women who came to, I think, my second event that I ever did, she shared with me that that was the first time she had ever been naked where sex wasn't being asked of her. I still remember that. That is still so profound to me.
Yeah.
And a part of how nudity became healing for me, well, actually, the first experience that I had was in a non-sexual environment. And I mean, I was in the experience, and I remember I went to this class with my partner and I got topless, and it was a non-sexual space. And after that experience, I was like, I want to go back. And in reflection, it was because it was a non-sexual environment. I was able to like be partial. I wasn't fully naked, but I was able to be partially naked in this environment that was non-sexual. that was so healing. But that was like I feel like that was like the moment that was like the seed to this whole experience. And then it became really, really healing. So having a space, and we're doing it together. And so that's the thing, like we get naked together. I think that is one of the most important things is we are in agreement, and it is different too. And I've gotten feedback from other women, and I feel this too, even for myself, is that there's a difference between being in an environment and people just get naked and go swimming and being in an intentional container. Plus they have two different intentions, right? But coming into an environment like where we're all doing it together, we're in agreement, it's vulnerable, stuff's going to come up for us. There's something really precious about that provides something really unique. And, having boundaries to the space, like, even communicating like there's no sex, there's a boundary, no sex here, like seems obvious, but just having that communicated is so important. And it doesn't mean that we can't be sexual and our sexual energy isn't present, because I always say this to the women. Women are multi-orgasmic. If we're doing a process and energy is moving through you, energy is going to be moving through your body. So if there's like that part of you online is welcome. It's just that we're not intentionally engaging in sexual acts with ourselves or each other, but our sexual, sensual energy is welcome. And then that being distinct. And that, I believe, provides something really unique, because even if we're in other environments where we're naked, it doesn't mean that we're all in agreement about what that means. And just even like going to a nude beach. Not all nude beaches are created equal, but just because everybody's naked there doesn't mean that, they're in agreement that it's a non-sexual space.
Absolutely.
And
or that it's safe still. It might still not be safe.
Right. And so like those are really great places to go and explore, but also like what do you need in order to do that? And so I like to advise people who want to tap into the medicine of nudity is start in your own home, like in just really simple ways of going to bed naked, like try out sleeping naked. After you take a shower, like don't put a towel on or get dressed right away. Like just explore some of these spaces, or even cook, or if you have some privacy in your backyard, just even sit out on a chair and feel what it's like to be naked. But this is a space that you can explore that with yourself, that you can feel safe. Or that there's like no intrusion, or there's not likely to be an intrusion, or when you're home alone, there's like, you get to explore it with just you and you.
So we think about sensual, it really just means using your senses and to feel. So when you talk about lying on a bed of moss or feeling the earth, or just like actually feeling with all of your body instead of just our hands, or feeling senses for the pleasure and enjoyment of feeling things on your skin. And it doesn't have to be sexual. Maybe it brings those positive feelings, but just feeling like that's what it was coming up when you're talking about that. Sensual as being sensual in nature. It can be something that sounds so much more beautiful than your body being sexualized. It's like two different things.
It is two different things. Thank you for bringing that distinction in the way that you did. And I just kept thinking about, the yumminess of a bare belly on the ground. Like our wombs touching the earth. And that is about like, that's our whole body comes online. And it's not just our hands. It's not just our, sexualization of our genitals. It's about all of us getting to be, and also being able to touch those parts of ourselves. Like there's no shame to even just place your hand here. Like these are still parts of us.
Yeah. Yeah. Taking that shame out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How's the thought of being naked in your body doing right now?
It still feels scary. I think in that environment, that you're talking about and the sacred container that you create, it sounds appealing. You know, I think I'm like, okay, I'd still be really nervous. I'd still be really aware of other people's eyes on me and fear, I guess, or a concern of their thoughts of judgment. But I think by the end of that experience, after everyone's got, you know, you've kind of forgotten about it and that's kind of gone away, I would probably feel really good and feel really healed. I think it would be, I think it would be a really profoundly healing experience for me because I have such an issue with it.
Yeah. I mean, that's what the medicine is, right? And you would just be leaning into the thing that feels scary and uncomfortable. And by doing that, like all sorts of things would just naturally shift and change in that experience. And this is something that you don't know until you experience it. But once we're all naked, it's really magical how quickly the nudity, like the being naked part, isn't a thing. It's like as if something in the room was removed. But that's the experience until you have it. It's really quite fascinating how sometimes it's like instant for women and sometimes it's just maybe even the first day. There's like layers, but regardless, there's still an initial moment where there's something like just removing those pieces of clothing, something is just out of the way. It's really spectacular. That's actually one of my favorite things.
I love the idea too of the nakedness being like a metaphor too, like shedding your clothing, and it's not just the actual literally being naked, but also like peeling back and just becoming your truest self. And like, what are you releasing by doing that? You know, by making it this intentional process, what other things are you able to release?
Yeah. And also the places that, like, if we think about just our physical body, the places that we're feel embarrassed or shameful or like we're judging ourselves about, there's medicine there. There's a message there. Our body is communicating. There's some energy that's been stored up and repressed in this part of our body that is expressing itself. I also kind of look at it like I'm holding a container, and in this container, it has like these blueprints of energies and wisdom that come with it. So when we can remove our clothing and expose this part of ourselves, we can actually connect more deeper to what's really here. Like, what is that shame really about? And just like you shared with even your belly showing, and like, where did that come from? Why is that really here? What is this? Like, what is this about? I have it that by removing our clothing, we can actually hear those parts of ourselves, or we're in an environment where we're intentionally willing to connect with some part of ourselves that's been hiding in the dark or that's been covered up. Yeah. And so it's like illuminating or exposing. Exposing sometimes can just feel kind of harsh, that word. So like even saying it kind of feels like, ooh, sometimes exposing can feel a little triggering, but really like illuminating it into the light, and it's an opportunity. And sometimes just even being seen in it is healing, like walking around for 5 days naked and like some part that we're self-conscious about being seen and witnessed, but like we're seeing and witnessing it ourselves.
Yeah. Oh, it's so beautiful. I just think that you have an ability to create this comfort around it. You know, not everyone can make you feel so comfortable with something that is so vulnerable, and to, you know, make it normal and natural and beautiful and that it feels good. It's just you're just like exuding that.
Thank you. Well, you know what? I created what I wanted.
Yeah.
Like I wanted these things. Like and for me, this journey has been so much about healing sexual trauma and, you know, sexual being trespassed in my body. I mean, this has been really big for me in reclaiming and feeling safe in my body and like being in my body. My learned go-to was disassociate. I mean, there had been many times where I could like see my body and I was having this the sexual experience. And even throughout the years, I was still doing it even in partnerships.
Mm-hmm.
What I feel like is how it's been healing for me is like being in my body, like it's safe to be in my body. That can even show up when we have physical pain, right? Physical pain can be really uncomfortable emotions, and we want to like check out. I know what that's like tenfold.
Yeah.
I think we all do. And so like when we're naked, it does create this environment that we can be in our bodies. And I like the things that are here around like safety, and I'm constantly refining the experience, but it's what I've wanted. And also like I know what it's like to be a woman. So like creating a space and providing like, oh, this is what I would need to feel safe in this experience, or this is what I have discovered I've needed. And and just like we get to be human. I mean, I've had stuff come up with retreats. Sometimes I don't really have anything come up about my body, but I've definitely had like my own events that I'm facilitating, and I got stuff coming up.
Yeah.
Because I'm still in the portal too, in the portal too.
Yeah.
And so just like we're all human, and like we're coming in, and whatever's showing up is just what's here for us. And so I feel like having that in my roots is really helpful, because one of the hardest things is like feeling wrong and bad about anything that we're experiencing. I mean, I am committed to this human experience, really feeling in my body that however I'm feeling or being is really okay.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's there more than it's ever been. And sometimes I'm like, is this really okay? Like, is this okay for me to like feel this way or like express this thing? Because so much of our culture says no, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so this is just like, our naked bodies, anger or rage or tears, or oh, I said something and it hurt someone. It's just like all this stuff that's like clunking around. And this like environment to return to the earth.
Yeah.
How do you think the photos come into play? Because I've been thinking as we're talking also about we have mirrors. Well, let me go back. I know what I was going to say. So, part of the whole premise for me of creating this podcast was me thinking, besides just like biohacking and all this new stuff and newfangled things, what is our original form? I actually wanted to call it original human, and someone had already taken that name. So naked human, you're very similar, you're very close. Going back to our state as an animal creature, and what does that body need? So obviously the basics, sunlight, food, water, that kind of stuff. But also when I'm thinking about how much we are bombarded with images of other people that are edited and photoshopped and stuff like that, but also looking in the mirror all the time, I think about an ancient person, they probably would only see their reflection in the water, and that would be hard to see. And they'd probably just be fascinated and like, wow, this is so cool. This is me, just seeing that, not standing in front of a reflection everywhere they go, in every bathroom they go into, in every bedroom they go into, looking, analyzing, criticizing, comparing. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I think that's really magical point, and really important to reflect on. So many things there. One, so like at my events, I mean, the times that we've had a mirror is when we've done yoni gazing to see our own yonis. But that's actually one of the things I really like, is not seeing myself. And I think that that's a really great point. And all of a sudden we have all these mirrors all over the place, and we're constantly looking at, it's always about like, what are we looking like? What do I look like? And seeing ourselves. And what would it be like to like cover your mirrors in your house and not look at yourself, but just to feel, right? Like looking at ourselves in a reflection and then judging ourselves. Like, what is that? We would just be relating to the world through our own. I have it that like, if there were no mirrors, and just even thinking about this last retreat that I did, because that was something I was present to and was really enjoying it. was like, gosh, it just feels really good not to be like looking at my own self, but to be experiencing this experience through myself and not going to go look and see how do I look. And I think that that's what I had mentioned about like that whole energy, something shifts, is because there does become something about not looking at yourself like in a mirror.
Yeah.
And even like, what do you know, when we put on clothes and then we go look in the mirror and see how it looks.
Yep.
And I remember, who was it? Michael Singer. I was listening to something of his, and he said something like, you judge the clothing on how it looks versus how it feels on you. Like, you know, you're like, oh, how does this look on me? Versus like, how does this feel? Do I like how this feels on my body? And oh gosh, even thinking about a primitive time where there were no mirrors feels really magical.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually have a mirror that's back here behind me, but I don't like look in it. And what I was thinking about, we just did a bathroom addition into my tiny cabin. There's no mirror above the sink. There's a window. And my mom was like, you need a mirror there. That's what she sounds like.
Yeah, it's so standard to have a mirror above your bathroom sink, right?
I was like, I don't get, why is there a mirror above the sink? And by the way, if I needed to get close to my face, I got to bend over a sink anyway. No, if I'm going to have a mirror, I'm going to be able to get right up into that mirror and like, you know, pluck my eyebrows or something. You know, I'm not going to lean over the sink. And I was like, one, I don't really get why is it over the sink? Because even thinking about like, you know, if you wear makeup, putting makeup on and stuff like that, like, why is the sink here? Anyway, but I was like, I want to look outside. There's the forest right here. Like,
Yeah.
I don't need a mirror there when I'm, you know, brushing my teeth, washing my hands. I want to see what's happening outside.
Yeah, that's beautiful. We have too many mirrors.
Too many mirrors. No,
yeah, go ahead.
I just think that's a really great point. And like, I feel like, at least for me in this conversation, that's something I'm going to reflect on a bit more about the mirrors. And I do know how different it is to not be looking in a mirror. And I usually feel better. Do you feel better when you don't look in mirrors all the time?
Yeah. Or, well, I think that I'm hyper conscious and aware of other people's gaze. That's what I guess I was saying earlier on. Like, I can feel when someone's looking at me without looking and seeing that someone's looking at me. Do you know what I mean? So I don't know. I think that's what makes me so self-conscious is I just feel people looking at me all around me, and it just is like overwhelming. I don't know if that's like a feeling, like a I don't know. Do you have a word for it? Is it like an empath or something more, like something else? It's something like that.
Well, you're definitely aware of energy that's in your space. And something that was pinging for me that might be really helpful is like calling on some of your plant friends to create some protection. I've been doing this deep dive in purification and protection for a bit now, and always like, you know, like when we're, you know, you're attuned, you're sensitive, and you're aware of energy, you're intuitive, you're tapped in. These parts of you are online and you're aware of them. So like, what do you need? You know, and also if there's energies coming in and you're feeling it, that's just bombarding your space. Yeah. What do you need in order to have your own autonomy? I like to, you know, call on my little plant friends to help me in creating an energy to create like, hey, it doesn't mean that people can't come into my space. It's just about like, hey, I'm not online for everybody to like engage me. And so it's like this space to protect you energetically.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that a lot. I should be more mindful of that, or kind of like create that before I go out into public spaces, because people that are close to me are aware of it, because I'll say like, I'm just really uncomfortable going here, or everywhere I go out. I'm just hyper aware of other people's energy, I think. Yeah.
I was going to say, well, I think it would be really great to take some time to like tend to that, because I can relate to that. And as I've been tending to my own energetic space, things have been going differently for me. I don't necessarily prefer to go into big spaces, and it can be something really simple. Like I'll just like do a little prayer before I go into a certain type of environment. But I think that that's also really important. It's kind of interesting. I think it also relates to like being a woman too. It's like we're not available for everything. And just because we have these bodies and this energy doesn't mean that it's available to everyone. And so it's like reclaiming your own space.
Absolutely. Yeah. Who do you let in? Being really intentional, but yeah, energetically, who do you let in? Nope, I'm not going to let this energy in. I'm going to create this like little bubble.
Yeah. And so like the one that I have it that, you know, it's intelligent. So it's constantly learning, but it's like what stays out, what stays in, and what gets to come in and what gets to go out.
Yeah.
Most of my life, people pleasing, you
Me
know,
too.
all these things that we're taught, there's no boundaries, right? And like when I first started learning about that a boundary was for me and what I will do if and when something happens, I was so blown away. I was like, well, I was thinking a boundary is about like, you got to make people not do things. It's not about other people. It's about, this is what my boundary is. If and when this happens, this is what I will do. This is how I'll care for myself. And, you know, and even like being really intuitive. So like you can feel this energy. I've had experience where it's like, you know, I'm just picking up things about people. Anyway, all this to say is that boundaries are really important. And that's I think that just goes along with the conversation of like reclaiming our sacredness of our own body, our own beings.
Yeah. So how do the photos come into play? If we are talking about, well, we don't want to be sitting there looking at ourselves in the mirror and criticizing. Now we're taking these intentional photographs where we are seeing ourselves in a different light. How is that so different than the mirror, and how does that affect this whole process?
Well, I've never been asked this question about like, how is that different than the mirror and in this particular way? So, Well, so the photographs are intentionally there to be seen in a different way. And there's something, so there's a couple of different types of photographs that I take at the retreat. There's the candid photographs, which was the origin of the photographs at the retreat. So it was about just capturing these moments. And what's been really magical about that is that I have it, like, how often do we see ourselves, like, really in a moment of, like, crying? How often do we see ourselves actually, like, resting or just, like, being? And I always have this other image of, like, you know, all the photographs that we see, they're very posed, or, like, we're all smiling and we're, like, in front of the camera. I actually don't prefer those photographs. Like, I'm kind of like, ugh, okay. So like these particular photographs of being candid in the moment, I feel like are really special. And being able to see ourselves in an actual process or a tender moment. And so those photographs, I feel like, are so different because it's not staged. It's not intentional. It's just you're going through your process. And these are usually captured if there's somebody else there that's facilitating, or there's something that the women are doing. And my intention is to slink back and not really be seeing in the taking of the photographs, because if you notice that you're being photographed, then it can kind of take you out, or you're like, oh, I'm being photographed. And so I've definitely navigated that differently throughout the years. And then with a bit more of having these intentional photographs, it's actually become more playful for the women and fun and creative, of like, hey, what's inspiring you in this environment? And what do you want to merge with in your environment? And so it becomes about like connecting with the land and the earth. And so they're not like standing there and posing in their naked body and I'm capturing it. It's like, you know, what are you drawn to? And there was like this dead cedar and it was all like red. All the needles were red. And it's like, well, what do you want to do in here? Like, what's speaking? Like, if I wasn't here, like, what would you want to do? And then inviting the woman to go in and interact with whatever it is, the dirt, flower. One woman brought out her horse, and so it was just like connecting with her horse, and there's all these different experiences, but they are being photographed, but it's about like merging with what's in the environment and what are they feeling, and also dropping in before we do the photographs, like be thinking about like what in this environment is speaking to you, and then those photographs, when they receive them, become another layer of healing to see themselves. And sometimes it's really beautiful. It's usually like a mixture. It's like, wow, I really love these, or like, oh, I judged myself in this photo. And
so they talk, you get them and talk about them, or like
yeah. So
okay.
We have a month of integration. So we have a weekly integration call, and then I send them the photographs at some point. Usually that's one of the most eager things they're for. Well, some of the women, like, we're ready for our photographs. And I'm like, it's a process. Like, I have to send some sorts. And anyway, and then they receive the photographs and they view them on their own. And then we have space to talk about like what came up, what did they notice, or like what was there for them with their photographs. And so, thinking about the mirror thing is it's a totally different experience.
Yeah.
And I'm also, they're like being witnessed. And I think there's something about that too. Is I'm also helping guide them a little bit too. But the space is really for them to just drop into their body and what do they want to connect with? And also one of the questions that I usually ask them is, what do you want to feel? Like in these photographs, what do you want to feel?
Yeah. I think, and capturing them in this natural space, enjoying themselves in nature is so different than even specific posing, or like you said, like a set up photograph. You're just really capturing the essence of them, like being themselves in nature. That's totally different. Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes it's difficult, or it's uncomfortable for women. And that's where I offer a bit more guidance and like, and also feedback, like, oh, that's really beautiful, or the light is coming in on your face, and just helping them. Sometimes they're like, what, does this look okay? Or, and sometimes inviting them just to close their eyes, take a deep breath, let it out. Because those things can come online. I'm getting my photograph taken. There's this like, how am I supposed to be? I mean, I even have that when I'm getting so I like to have someone who's there who can help me just drop in and remember, like, hey, just take a deep breath. What's here? What's in your environment? What looks interesting? What's speaking to you?
Something I saw you post kind of recently that I loved was you said, can we compost the saying, coming back to the real world?
Yes.
And I thought that was so beautiful and profound, because I have done certain other kinds of totally unrelated retreats, but retreats where like you get in this beautiful, like peaceful, magical place, and then you come back to modern day stresses, or, for me, I have children. So like your family and just the mundane, and so I've absolutely said that and felt that like, now I'm back to the real world. And you say, well, this is the real world, that space is the real world. So yeah, talk about that.
Thank you for bringing that into the space. I feel really passionate about this.
Yeah.
I don't want these experiences to just be some magical experience. And also, if you're there, like you're there in that experience, it is your life. And also bringing in, like, dissolving that separation. Like if you're on this, whatever retreat that you're on, there's something there about that experience that is you, that's calling you. And so like I think about the events that I facilitate, and it's about having a connection with the earth. And that's what's really at the root. This is like returning home to whoever we are, to ourselves, and whatever that means for each of us. But this relationship with ourselves, with the earth, with our bodies doesn't have to disappear after 5 days. Like there's things here in this experience that are who you are or that you're connected with. And then like, oh, I can't have this. Like, to me, it just sounds like I can't have this in my day-to-day life.
Mm-hmm.
I only get to have this in this designated amount of time. And I just think that's bullshit. I goes call bullshit on that of like, if we want it to be different, like dissolving that.
Yeah.
This is our real world, and it can be our real world, and it requires us to bring that into our lives. And that's also why over the years I've included more integration calls, because I just don't want it to be just an experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, how can I support these women in bringing this into their lives? You were just naked here for 5 days. How does that get to exist in your life now? Like, where can you find this medicine and this connection and stay connected to being naked in your life? And whatever that looks like for you, you know, or like or a practice that really stands out. Like yoni sunning is usually one that women are just like, it's just so transcendental. And they're like, how can I yoni sun at home? Okay, let's bring that conversation in. Like, how does this get to be a part of your life? That's how our life changes. And so when we're just like, hey, no, this actually has to stay here, we leave it there. We leave that person that we discovered there in the woods. And I'm like, no, we're not leaving her behind.
No.
we bring it in.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've just heard that in spaces so many. And that was something I definitely communicated to the women. Like, this is your life. You're here. You're experiencing this. Whoever is here, this you, she's in you. And so like, I'll be damned if we leave her here. Like, how does this get to integrate into your life, into you, and like have your life become just more of you? And yeah, and I really get that there is this juxtaposition, right? And then coming back to your home.
Yeah.
And the environment's different. And that's a very real phenomenon. So it's not to say that that experience isn't real. It's just like, hey, how do you bring some piece of magic that you experience or something you really connected with, bring that into your life? And then like it gets to merge.
Yeah. Yeah. And it has to. You come back to a chaotic environment, but if you can always remember those feelings and try to learn how to bring them into your everyday and keep it kind of with you all the time, that's like where the true integration and healing has happened, right?
Yeah. And it could even be something like, you know, sleeping naked. You know, however uniquely that comes into your life, or like I said, with the yoni sunning, women have created spaces in their backyards so that they feel safe and have some privacy to yoni sun. And you know, just like bringing that, there's something that you connected with, and then that has that impact on your well-being. And it doesn't, you know, it doesn't have to be this like big explosive thing, though. You know, things do get upheavaled sometimes when people come to any retreat and they come into their home life, and, you know, things get jostled around because they have been. But like, how, you know, how to bring those pieces in. So if there is chaos and there was peace that you discovered, what can you connect to bring that peace thread in?
That was making me think too about how does this impact coming back into a relationship? I feel like becoming more comfortable in your own skin would only really be positive, but also maybe that creates even more boundaries, as you've mentioned. Like sometimes in a partnership, there still are moments of dissociation or moments of letting your boundaries be crossed because you just think that's what you're supposed to do, or you've just never been taught how to listen to your body and like honor your desires or what you feel really comfortable with. So has anyone expressed that they come back and it's really changes their relationship and how they approach their relationship?
Yeah, it definitely has. And it doesn't mean that it's always all positive or well received, but especially the place of having more boundaries or finding more of your voice. I've definitely received feedback from women of coming back, into the relationships and these conversations, things coming up, and like having, and sometimes, the whole pendulum thing, like you discover something and sometimes that pendulum swings in another direction. So like reclaiming their own bodies sometimes can be like, hey, I'm right now, I'm not available for intimacy. And so like that can come up, or they start using their voice more. And, that's like bringing more things up within their partnership. And so I've definitely received the feedback or the reflections from the women of things that have come in, and how initially sometimes that can show up. But there's definitely this aspect about reclaiming, but then there's also this aspect about opening. And I've seen both of them, where there's like, oh, I feel more open to be like naked with my partner or around my partner, or have sex with my partner with, without the lights off. And there's that. And then there's sometimes like, hey, actually, I need some space to just like, I'm here reclaiming like my yeses and my nos.
Yeah.
And
I could see
so
that.
it's the whole, it's the whole gamut.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. That's really beautiful and profound too, though. Like,
well, I think I'm going to switch gears a little bit, because I would like to talk to you about, are you still practicing? Like, are you practicing Chinese medicine? Do you see patients?
I actually very minimally
Yeah.
do that. So I've been doing here locally some community acupuncture, which is like my own style of like, we come and we have I do like a little opening and we do these energetic exercises, and then I do acupuncture with everyone and either play music myself or do some pranic healing with them, and which is an energy healing. And that's actually where my heart's at with that. This was actually my shift in Chinese, like practicing acupuncture, was a big part of what I'm doing now, because I was working, gosh, what was that, like 10 years? And so I was like working with one patient would come in and go out, and I just felt like this isn't for me anymore. And it was the structure for sure. And it was being indoors. So I was like, I don't want to be indoors so much, even though it's like this really magical room and whatever. It's like, I don't want to be indoors anymore. And this was the time that I just was like, I want to work with groups. And that was like an initiator of like where I am now, because if that hadn't changed, what I'm doing now just wouldn't have happened. So,
Yeah.
I mean, the medicine still exists. It's still in these spaces, but the actual act of practicing acupuncture isn't something that I've done it here and there. And sometimes it's more like, I have this tool.
Yeah.
But it's just not where my heart's at right now. And I'm a big fan of reminding people that the medicine is within them. And I might still have some resistance that I found that when I was practicing acupuncture full time, is lots of people would come and like want me to fix them.
Yeah.
I don't want to fix anyone. I want to like help you remember, which is what I would do. But I would still be met with a lot of that energy of like, what can you do for me? And it's like, well, like I can help you remember who you are, help you get out of the way of you, but there's something bigger happening here. And so I really like working energetically in groups now. And maybe it's also because I worked one-on-one so much, but for my energy palette as it is right now, it's actually a lot easier for me to navigate group spaces. And I feel really nourished in those environments. And when I work on one-on-one, it takes a lot more for me to work one-on-one than it does with a group of people. And so I'm just honoring that that's what's so. However, there is an exception, I will say, is that when we work with plants. So like but there's another energy that's there. So like if I'm working one-on-one with someone, with a plant, it's not really one-on-one. We're still in community. There's still plant consciousness in there, and we're connecting with the plant. And so there's just something different about that for me. And just a little side note, I'm a projector in human design. So I don't know if you know or if anybody listening knows about human design, but I've definitely learned a lot about what that means for me. And it's just helped me navigate how I use my energy.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a long-winded
No, it's fine. I'm just curious about that background and that training. How does that come in with the nudity? Because there is energetic stuff, and I don't know enough about Chinese medicine to come up with these, really specific questions. But the energetics, the maybe even pressure points of when you're out in nature, how does that incorporate, and how does it influence your work now?
Yeah, so it has a lot to do also with the seasons and the energies of the season. So, like springtime being connected to the liver and the gallbladder organs, and just being mindful about even the plants. So, like in my events, we work with intentionally, like with a plant or a couple of plants to form these relationships. So, even thinking about the energetics of what's happening in our body and what's happening in the earth and tying that in. And so, like with the energy of the liver, and the liver expresses, the emotion of the liver is anger. And so there's a healthy anger, there's a repressed anger. And so like connecting to that energy and allowing that to be present in there. And that's actually something that I'm bringing more conversation into the space with.
Yeah.
And I have a summer retreat coming up. And so I'm just reflecting on in the summertime in Chinese medicine, it's the fire element. So it's yang, summer's hot and, active. And it's also connected to the heart and the small intestine. And the heart is the emperor of the body. And the small intestine's job is to sift and sort. And so like bringing that energy, that fire energy, and also like how can we bring more awareness and connection into these parts of ourselves that are online. But then also the grandmother of the fire element is water. So like while summer is fiery, we're actually going to be working with water and like nourishing our water. And also like foods are very watery at that time because there's like this cooling aspect. So while we can lean into this fiery part, we actually like, for me, oftentimes it's about connecting with the energy that's opposite. So like when it's winter, it's like having relationship also with fire in that time. So like bringing in these other parts that nourish. So like the grandmother nourishes the granddaughter. And so the water nourishes the fire. And so how can we connect with that? And even just sharing about like, this is what's happening at this time. And a lot of it shows up as I reflect and I think about the plants that we work with too. That's a big part of it.
Yeah, I love that.
And also, I will say at this last retreat, one of the women was asking me about her sinuses, and she said, I usually get really bad allergies at this time of year. And I just started sharing with her about the liver and the gallbladder and the channels running, the gallbladder running through the sinuses, but also the gallbladder's energy is about making decision, and the liver's energy is about being able to follow through. So there's like this directness and, there's this sprouting and this birthing. And so we had this conversation and she shared some things with me. And so, we moved through the retreat and we worked with lavender and tobacco. And on the second integration call, she shared that she hasn't had any allergy symptoms this past season.
Wow.
And like, I mean, we were definitely, working with plants, but even just having that conversation illuminated. And I think it's really important being connected to like, this is what this organ does for us in our life. Like, yes, it does this physically, but the energetics of the organ and our ability to make a decision, to be clear enough to make a decision, and then to be able to follow that through. Like these energies are really online right now in the springtime, and getting connected to that. And that was something that I shared with her, is like, this is what it's physically, but also take a look at that place within you of like, where are you being hesitant or unclear in the ability to make a decision and like the follow through. And so getting connect and the emotions, the confusion or the repressed anger or, like what's really happening with that. And so that's you know, that's a bit about how it's getting interwoven. But like I said, I'm also starting to bring that conversation in a bit more and talking about like, these are the energies that are at play, and leaning more into that being alive in this space.
Yeah. That so much more than just being naked.
Yeah. And also, while still trying to keep it all simple, because like my brain has also, I mean, I do not have a deficit of ideas.
Yeah.
And
things.
I
understand that.
but like constantly keeping it simple. And like the group conversations, there's only so many that can be had, but something that I'm wanting to actually integrate more is having at the retreat a space to have one-on-one time with each of the women. Just like I've been just doing more check-ins, one-on-one check-ins, and that feels really special. And this is when one of those conversations came through for her. Mm-hmm. And so just having a bit of that interwoven, and just allowing the space to express what it needs to, because I always come in with a plan, and I always know that plan is subject to change, and it is subject to change. And it's not necessarily that things don't necessarily happen. It's just that one morning it's like, no, this is what we need today. We need stillness. We don't need to rage it out today or this morning. Mm-hmm. And then, just listening to the earth and what's needed.
So do you pick specific plants each retreat that people are going to connect with, or is it they connect with plants in the environment at the retreat and they kind of are in tune to that?
So what I've been doing is I select a plant, or the plant selects us, I should say.
Yeah.
And then we all connect, which also enriches that, so we can share reflections. So we sat around the fire and we sat with tobacco, and then we had the space for the women to share, like, what did they feel? What was there for them? And then also hearing those reflections from the other women just, I feel like, helps us get things even more, or like, oh yeah, that's what I felt. And so we intentionally work with the same plant or the same plants. And I've just been playing around with, I've done one plant, like we worked with rose throughout the whole retreat one year. And then, like I said, this last retreat, we worked with lavender and tobacco. And it doesn't mean sometimes other plants don't show up, but it's like we're coming to connect with the energies of these plants, and they're here to help us.
Yeah.
And so it's about helping the women form these relationships. Because what's really important to me is, like, you have your body and we have a relationship with the earth. It's important for me to share things, practices, experiences that we get to have that don't require a lot of bells and whistles or going out to buy a bunch of things, but like reminds us that it's within us, and these are our relationships. So I don't know if I would do in a retreat like everybody gets to select their own. I could. That might be somewhere in the future. I really like, the plants that come in to help us specifically with whatever the energies are, and really like solidifying those relationships and seeing how they unfold. And especially working with a plant like tobacco. Oh my gosh, when tobacco said, hey, this retreat, I was like, oh my gosh, all the stigma about tobacco and cigarettes and these things, and is that going to repel some women? And so I was like, let me back off that a little bit. And then tobacco reminded me. I was like, no, I belong here. Like, if he doesn't speak to me like that, but like basically he's like the grandfather on the porch that somehow says things without saying anything. But and the magical thing is that all these women have this relationship with this plant now that some of them didn't even consider or imagine, but like really surprised them, has been really healing.
It's kind of the perfect plant if you think about it, because there is such a stigma, just like being naked.
Oh my gosh, yes!
Yeah, because it's this beautiful sacred medicine that indigenous cultures acknowledge that and use that as this, like, And now it's been, gosh, I can't even think of a good word, like bastardized, basically.
That is the word. That is the word. I was going to say it if you weren't. I was like, yeah, bastardized.
Yeah. So, and just like our beautiful naked bodies that are just natural and normal, and we think that there's something to be hidden and ashamed of. So it's kind of the perfect plant.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, I agree. Yeah. I didn't quite actually see that piece, but it makes perfect sense. And he wouldn't let me back away from not having him there because I was like, ooh, ooh, ooh. Even though I was like, yeah, this feels important.
Yeah, I grow tobacco in my garden, and we don't smoke it or do anything with it. I just grow it and appreciate it. And the flowers are so beautiful and they smell so beautiful. And it's just such a powerful plant to interact with.
That's amazing. You know, what's interesting is that tobacco has helped me a lot.
Yeah.
With protection.
I should do that.
You can even just sit with him, right? Like that's the thing is, working with plants you can connect to the spirit of a plant. And also a disclaimer about, working with plants is to be mindful about what you're doing, whether you're ingesting or not ingesting, but you can just connect with the spirit of the plant. And something that my teacher says that I love is that, any plant, anything in life, there's a fine line between medicine and poison. And just knowing where that is. Some plants, there's a finer line of that. And these spirits are strong. Tobacco is a strong spirit. And so.
Yeah. Well, Kerry, is there anything else that you really wanted to talk about or that you're feeling called to talk about?
Well, damn, we
talked about a lot of stuff.
Oh my God. I mean, I'm sure there's so much more that we could talk about. And this conversation has been amazing. So amazing. And it's been really nourishing. And it touches my soul. I really appreciate you for having me on and all the listeners listening in and whatever you're getting for yourself and connecting to in this conversation. That's a gift.
Yeah. Everyone should go listen to Kerry's podcast too, because she has something beautiful and insightful in every one. And she says, take what you need from it and trash the rest.
Yeah, exactly. Just because I say something doesn't mean you resonate with it or it's speaking to you. So yeah, trash it, throw it away, just take what you need. That's what this conversation is here for.
Yeah. Well, where can people find you? How can they join your retreats? Give them all the details.
Yeah, well, so they can find me at the Naked Human Podcast. Really the best way to see what I'm up to and discover me is through my website, which is my name, kerrykott.com. Social media, I could recommend that. You can also find it through my website, but sometimes that's fickle for me, sharing the medicine of nudity. So yeah, I am on Instagram a lot and Facebook. Those seem to be two platforms that I enjoy being on. So if you want to follow me there, everything is on my website, upcoming events, retreats, social media, podcast. You can find everything there under that hub. And for women interested in coming to retreats, they can also, you can always message me, send me a message, or reach out to me in some form.
Awesome. I hope I do someday. I think it's going to be profound medicine for me.
Yay! I would be honored. Would love to have you there.
Thanks, Kerry. Well, I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day.
Ciao.
Bye.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please take a moment to leave a review. In that review, I would love to hear what topics you'd like to see covered next and which guests you'd love to hear from in future episodes. You can connect with me on Instagram at Original Being Podcast, and be sure to follow, like, and share the podcast on all platforms to help spread the word. Thanks for listening.